Welcome everyone for an incredibly special episode of the Head in the Clouds show. But today we're going to talk about how to get a tech job, what hiring managers look for in an employee, and tech career coaching. But I'm really excited, and the reason I'm really excited is we have my good friend Alvin Da Cost. Alvin was actually my manager about 20 years ago. He and I came through the ranks at Cisco together. He and I started mentoring people together. Between us, we probably have close to 50 years tech career mentoring. Alvin is a vice president over at NVIDIA, an extremely good leader, and I'm just so thrilled to have you here. So tonight we'll talk about cloud architect career guidance and cloud engineer career guidance, but really it's more about what hiring managers want. And it's about those critical tech career secrets to success. We'll talk about some tech leadership development and tech career guidance and tech career paths. If you want, you can ask about the best tech career crafts. But, Alvin and I, we've been known for decades as technology thought leaders. And we've been doing so much tech career mentoring, and I love it. Alvin loves it. And, whether you're looking for cloud architect training or getting a cloud architect job or being a data scientist, it really doesn't matter. Being able to ask someone like Alvin that's done it and lived for 20 years, hearing that hiring manager perspective, so you can hear what hiring managers really want. And it's not certifications, I can promise you now. I've spoken to thousands of hiring managers, and certifications are last on their list, but there's a lot of things what they want. We've got Alvin, you can ask him. He has hundreds of people working for him in some capacity. He's a VP over at NVIDIA, and runs their partner. So we're all kinds of excited. Before we get into the context, everybody give me a hashtag cloud hired so I know that you're awake, alert, and oriented. Give me another hashtag that says Alvin, because trust me, he's got a lot better things to do than being here helping me with my show. But he's here to help you build your best technology careers. And when you know exactly what hiring managers want, you'll know how to get a tech job, any tech job for that matter. So before we begin, I want to let you know that we've officially released our brand new AWS Certified Solution Architect at Associate book. Had 100 authors to put in this thing with hundreds of years of experience, and we're giving away completely free, so anybody that needs it all over the world. And we're going to be producing so much more content on LinkedIn. We're doing some things behind the scenes to make the content even better and more exciting. So follow us on LinkedIn. And if you're looking to get your first cloud architect job, join us on Thursday on the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. I'll tell you everything you need to know to get hired, the things you need to learn, the things hiring managers care about, the things that need to be on your resume, how you skip those pesky HR people that auto-reject you when you lack experience. We'll cover it all. And of course,
Mike, slow down. I can't keep up with you.
Mike's got a lot on his mind.
I can't find my stuff.
Okay, you can tell that turmeric tea's been working really well, huh, Mike?
I have been. I've had such a sore throat, and I've been drinking green tea and turmeric tea all day. Can you tell? I'm a little rapid thinking.
All right, we're on the webinar. Give me a second. Okay.
Oh, man.
And if my voice is a little weak, I've got a little voice strain laryngitis now for about the third week.
All right. Okay. All right. Now you can talk about the last thing.
The last thing is Chris and team have extended the 30% off security deposit for Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and it goes until the end of the month, which is a few more days from now. So you got a few more days to get our training at 30% off.
I think you said deposit. I think you meant discount.
Yeah, 30% discount. Bear with me for that.
You're too excited.
I am excited. I'm like a little kid.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. You are all excited. I gotta say, I never get tired of that video of all those cloud hires, and
yeah,
I interview all the cloud hires, and I still never get tired of it.
Never.
Now, I do have to say, did anybody let me know if you noticed anything different about that video in the chat box? There was something different about the video.
There sure was, Chris.
Let me know if you noticed it in the chat box. But anyway, I that's why I was smiling as big as I was when we came on here. So
I love whoever made that video. I really appreciate the new lead-in for the video. Now the people know that while YouTube's signaling people, 5 more, 4, 3, 2, 1, we get them here. And now for more than 2 decades. He was once my manager. In fact, I remember when I joined his team, I was interviewed by 2 sets of managers, and one was on some vertical and one was on the IBM vertical. And apparently they both wanted me and they were arguing over which one a team I was allowed to be on. And I got to work with Alvin for a while. Alvin taught me a great many lessons. Alvin even got me involved in more formal mentoring of others. But Alvin is a great manager. He's truly a great leader. I've seen him grow so many great leaders and professionals that I've known him for a long time. We used to help each other get promoted and help each other move up. I have utter and complete and total respect for Alvin, and I'm so thrilled that he's willing to join us to share some of his wisdom. Alvin, you want to tell some people about yourself a little bit for a minute or two? And then I know Alvin and I didn't exactly come from riches when we joined our tech career. Yeah. We both came from very, very humble beginnings. Most people know I basically worked 2 full-time jobs as a paramedic to pay my way through school. And, Alvin came from very humble beginnings too. In fact, he's here as an immigrant. And actually, I'll let Alvin tell you a story, but, Alvin's amazing. And if Alvin, if you want to introduce yourself and then talk about things, then we'll go back and forth a little bit.
Sounds great, Mike. So I'm humbled to be here. And so I want to thank Mike and the Go Cloud team for having me. My name is Alvin Da Cost. I've been in the industry for 25 years. I started in tech support, and I currently I'm the vice president of the worldwide partner organization for NVIDIA. So I have roughly about 60 direct reports and about 300 people dotted line to me globally. And I do all the strategy for the company, whether it's operations, new product introduction, anything that comes out for the company, I typically would run and make sure that we're selling the product line. And so I wanted to start off today by telling my story because it's very different from everyone has a story and everyone has a different career trajectory and a different path of how they get to where they go. My parents were born in Africa. My mother was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and my father was born in Zanzibar. And they were there for many years, and what happened back then is the British ruled, and then the Africans started to take over because there was a coup. And so it started to get a little violent. And at that time, my parents decided to come to America, and they applied for a visa. They ended up in San Francisco in 1968, and I was born in 1972 in San Francisco. And at that time, there weren't a lot of colored people here. And, there was a lot of racism that happened. And my parents would go door to door looking for job opportunities. And they ended up finding opportunities. My mother worked as a secretary, and my father worked for the railroad as a clerk. And what was interesting about that is they really didn't have time to kind of help me with like my homework or my mentorship as I was going through the school systems here. And so a lot of times I would be learning on my own, and periodically when, they came home from work, which was usually late because they were commuting to San Francisco from where we lived. So they would usually be home by 6, and then they would make dinner and, we'd start homework at around 7. It was hard on me growing up as a kid. I didn't have the best grades, I would say, through middle school or high school. Conceptually, I knew a lot of things. I was very good at mathematics. It just naturally came to me easily. But I always made careless mistakes on my tests. So I always ended up resulting in B's and C's in my classes, even though I was in calculus in high school and my, which was pretty advanced. I always got B's or C's because I was always careless with forgetting the negative sign or forgetting a parenthesis or whatever it may be, which I'm sure all of us have done in our careers. So when I graduated from high school, I didn't get into any colleges, which was kind of disheartening and disappointing because many of my cousins did very well. A lot of my cousins ended up going to UC Berkeley. They went to San Jose State, did a bunch of, UC Davis, etc. And so I had to go to community college and figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I went to community college and I did well in school, but I had to pick a career and I didn't know what to do. And at the time, when I was going to high school. Like tech wasn't really a big thing. It was around, but it wasn't super big like it is today. And so I decided to go into civil engineering, and I majored in civil engineering. And I ended up transferring to San Jose State, and I graduated with a civil engineering degree in 1996. At that time, 1996 to 2000, there was a disruption in the market. Internet speed started speeding up, and DSL was launched at the time. And I remember the stock market was going crazy. Data centers became more affluent at the time. Everyone was looking for, Mike remembers, we were doing high availability designs with Cat 6Ks back then at Cisco. And that was like the big thing, is everyone wanted to build data centers. Companies like Navisite, Yahoo, Alta Vista, they were all launching data centers, and the technology boom started to happen. And I was a civil engineer on the sidelines trying to figure out, how am I going to get into this industry, because I wasn't getting paid much. I was a math tutor through college. I made $20 an hour. And when I got my first job as a civil engineer, I was making $15 an hour, which was disheartening. And so I had to figure out, how am I going to get to tech and make some decent money? So what I did is one night I decided, I was speaking to a coworker next to me, and I said, we got to figure out a way that we got to break into tech. I said, you go call everybody you know. I'm going to go call everybody I know and see if there's any opportunities. And I called a friend of mine, his name was Eric. And I remember clearly the day where he said, oh, we're hiring people left and right, and you don't need any experience, because DSL just launched and people were calling in tech support, and the queue time was 3 hours long. I said, oh, wow, I would love to have an opportunity to try to work in tech. And so he said, I'll get you hooked up with my manager. And I had an interview in about a week. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought a book called TCP/IP for Dummies. And I read that book in about 3 days, and I learned how to subnet, and I learned about IP addressing. And then I called a friend over and I asked him a question about, what's a NIC card do? What does a cable do? What does a switch do? What does a hub do? Asked all these questions, and I basically learned networking 101 in about 4 days, and I went in for this interview. I get to the interview, and I see this guy. He has a nose ring, earrings all the way down, tattoos on his arms, right? And I'm sitting there, and I'm dressed up in a suit. I got a briefcase. I got my resume and everything. He takes a look at me, and he says, "What the hell are you all dressed up for?" And I said, I'm here for the interview. And he said, "Dude, this is the internet. Look out that window. Do you see anyone else dressed up here?" And everyone is wearing shorts, t-shirts, and everything. And I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah, welcome to the internet world. This is a very different place." So I remember I sit down, right, for this interview, and I'm like getting ready to spit out some knowledge. And he asked me one question. He says, "So you're a friend of Eric's?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "How long have you known him?" I said, "About 10 years. And he says, "Why do you want to work in the internet business?" And I said, "Because it's changing, it's exciting, there's a lot of great things we could do." And he said to me, "Okay, you're hired," on the spot. And he said, "HR." Yeah. And that was it. And he said, "HR will call you within the next 2 days and work out a package." And so I remember at that time, I thought to myself, this is crazy. I'm going into this job where I knew absolutely nothing. So my first day at work, I go into to configure DSL. And Mike will probably remember Redback Networks, right? So Redback Networks was a famous company back then. And my buddy just taught me how to configure with PVC circuits and how to like input them and output them and set up the DSL. And that's how we trained, right? And it was interesting because at that time, I was learning DSL, became an expert, and I kept studying. And I decided to go for my first certification, which was a Cisco CCNA. And back then, in 2000, it was roughly around 97, a CCNA was a big deal. It was like to like an AWS cloud security architect today. It was a really big deal back then. And so I got my CCNA, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, you got a CCNA." And then I started teaching classes at PBI, Pacific Bell Internet, and then eventually I decided that 3 months later, you'll laugh at this, I got a call from Excite at Home to go help them build out their business for DSL, and they were the cable modem company.
Wow.
So I ended up going to Excite at Home, and I stayed there. Kept going up the Cisco ranks. I got my CCNP when I was there. Then I did then that was it up there. And then what happened is I stayed there for about 9 months, and then I got a call from Cisco, and Cisco said, "Hey, we're looking for a pre-sales engineering role. Would you like to do that?" And I said, "Well, what do they do?" And the lady said, "I don't know. Let me get the manager to explain it to you." So she calls him, right? And the manager comes on, and she's explaining this role to me. And then I'm like, "Oh, this sounds like an interesting role." So I go for the interview. I meet him at Denny's at 11 o'clock at night because he's flying around, and things were crazy back in 2000. And he interviews me, and then I get hired. And when I get hired, I'm pretty excited, and I'm like, "Oh wow!" So I got to do this SE role. And so at Cisco, I stayed there for 13 years. I started off at the very, very bottom, which is the systems engineering level 1. And then I moved up the ranks, to level 2, level 3, and then in 2004, I got my first manager shot. And that's roughly when I met Mike in about 2004, 2005, when I hired Mike to help me. And I think what it was for me, what ultimately gave me that drive and passion was everybody needs that. There's a great TED talk by Angela Duckworth, and it's called it's about calling the grit, about having the grit, the will, and the desire to be successful. And at that time, I remember my experience of not getting into a good college and all my cousins getting into good colleges, because at family parties, it would always come up and I would always feel bad, right? And the one thing I did is I wanted to make my parents proud of who I was and what I could accomplish. And so I worked hard to get that first manager role. And through that, before even that, to get to that level, you have to be a good individual contributor. You have to have a brand in the field. And so I worked with everybody, and I won many awards quarter after quarter, year after year as an individual contributor. And then I had my shot to become a manager, and I got my shot as an engineering manager. From there, I ended up working my way up through the ranks as a manager. And when I was asked to take over the data center team, I built a brand new team from scratch. And that year, I was on stage with John Chambers, and I won Manager of the Year for the Americas. And I was very happy with that. And then that was the pinnacle of my career as an engineer. And then I thought to myself, okay, where do you go now, right? And so leveraging all my field experience, all the knowledge I gained from everybody that I have that worked for me, I decided to move into worldwide strategy and sales for channels. And so basically in that role for worldwide channels, I progressed my career at Cisco. I did a lot of the data center acquisitions, a lot of the programs I wrote, a lot of the enablement strategies, et cetera. And then from there, I decided I couldn't cross the boundary to become a director at Cisco. And so I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do? So I had a hard, and at that time I was highly rated. I was in the top 1%. I've won all the manager awards. I was on stage with Chambers. I won the global awards for Worldwide Partner Organization. But for some reason, I couldn't progress to that next level. So I had to make a career choice here. And I had to basically say, where was I going to go with my career? And I decided, I talked to my boss and I told him my desire to move to the next level. And he basically told me, he said, Alvin, you're young and you're a talented guy. If I were you, I would leave Cisco and go explore other options. And I remember that night, I decided to go and explore options. And I found an opportunity literally that night to go work for a company called Nimble Storage, who I happen to be working with, doing solution architecture with Cisco. So I reached out to the manager over there, and I decided to go and take a shot at doing a startup. They were pre-IPO, 200 people. So I'm going from this massive company of, at the time, 60,000 people down to 200 people. And to be very candid with you guys, I was scared.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that entailed, like how big that role was going to be, because I was comfortable in my comfort box. And that's another point that I want to bring to your attention is don't become complacent in your current roles. If you're looking to grow, it's always okay to be uncomfortable, because that's how you grow and learn, right? And so when I looked at that, I decided to take the leap of faith and go to a company which I had a good feeling was going to go public. And I started on December 13th in 2013. I remember the day. And so what happened is I started this company. I was super excited, and they wanted me to do a board of directors presentation on how I was going to grow the channel. And so what ended up happening is I was getting ready to present. It was February 14th, Valentine's Day, I remember. And the day before, I had to take my wife to the hospital. And I found out that day that she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I remember I called my CEO to tell him that I was not able to do the board direction because my wife was just diagnosed with cancer, and I'm going to have to spend some time with her and the family. And so through that, I had to manage dealing with my career and managing my wife's chemotherapy and helping her along with my 2 children that I had, which were young at the time. They were 8 years old and 5 years old at the time. And so trying to find a balance to manage through all that was something that I had to really think through. And so as a leader, you have to know how to leverage and manage. And so what I did is I kind of figured out a strategy that was going to help me make our company successful, but at the same time, be able to take care of my family and have a good work-life balance. And so what I did is I hired the smartest people I could hire, right? I told my boss the situation, he gave me headcount, and I brought in people that were smarter than me. First rule of thumb as a manager is you always hire people smarter than you that bring in a different perspective. Managers that don't hire people that are smarter than them is old school management, right? I don't worry about the perception of someone doing better than me that reports to me, because at the end of the day, you hired that person. You recognize the skill set that they're good. And so that's really important to bring to bear. And so I managed that process, and I did it for 2 years. My wife passed away in a few years later, 3 years after that, when I was at the startup, and I took a couple of months off, but my CEO was grateful and they treated me well, and I was able to successfully revamp that company. We took it public, we did well, and then they ended up selling the company to HPE. From there, I decided once I found out about the acquisition, I decided that I wanted to do something different, because I already worked for a Cisco. I didn't want to go work for an HPE. So I started looking again on LinkedIn, which is my favorite place to look for jobs, by the way. For some reason, I always find good jobs there. And then I saw the posting at NVIDIA, and I applied at NVIDIA, and I got the job there to be the director of channel programs. And what was interesting at that time was I was a little overwhelmed. And I was very uncomfortable in that role for a couple of reasons. Number one, I didn't have the staff that I needed to support me. Number two, it was semiconductor, which is something I never worked in before. And so what I had to do is I had to figure out in my head mentally, how am I going to be successful here? And so what I did is I looked upon my core strengths. My core strengths are I know how to build a strategy. I know how to build a team, and I know how to execute, and I know how to document and put metrics together. So what happened to me initially is all these initiatives started coming to me, and I had to figure out, how do I manage all these different initiatives and be successful at the same time? And so I focused on my core, those 4 core things. And, successfully we grew today. Now I have a very large team. They're putting a lot more responsibility, but my 4 core things still remain intact that helped me get to where I am today. So I think the key message is, as I reflect on my career and as I looked on my past, is number 1, it's okay to be uncomfortable in any role you take, because uncomfortable is going to help you prosper in the long run. You will grow, you will learn, and you will gain that experience. The second thing that I've learned is to leverage. There's other people that are experts, and there's always people willing to help you. If for some reason you don't understand how to do something, you ask somebody for help, right? And they will help you, and you learn from that experience. And I think the third thing is really understanding what your strengths are, what you bring to the table, and making sure that you leverage that strength to your best ability. You always focus on the A player in you. And there was a book with Jack Welch wrote, do you focus on the A players, the B players, and the C players? His answer is, you focus on the A players, because those are the ones that are going to help you prosper. So you got to focus on your strengths. And so, I know Mike will go into a dialogue, but that's kind of the story I want to share with everyone, because it's a very different perspective than many people had. I come from a very humble background, pretty average kid growing up playing sports in the street, but kind of did something with my career. And that's how I came up.
And
Wow. Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, you beat me to the punch on that.
I took a few notes that I wanted to talk about, but Alvin.
So did I. So I'm glad.
But and I know Alvin, and Alvin is the truly, truly, truly great leader. And I'm going to highlight a few points, but I want to have some fun with this for a second. When the HR didn't know how to explain what a systems engineer is, that's because I don't know how I would explain it. To me, I was credit card boy. I'd buy lunches, dinners, drinks, go give a speech, go take out my credit card, buy lunches, dinners, and drinks. Alvin, how much of that did you do as a systems engineer?
Yeah, exactly. All the time, right? You're always taking out customers and partners, et cetera. That was big part of the job.
Yeah, and even before I became a full architect as a systems engineer, I don't think I ever touched the tech in my life. Did you?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing, when people want these salesy engineers and these architecture roles, they're so business focusing on coding, configuring, and everything not related to the job. And it really was this. No, I know why you got stuck at Cisco, because I got hammered with the same thing. We both took a different pathway. I wanted to move into some strategic leader positions or like, you're an engineer. And I'm like, I'm not an engineer. They're like, you're an engineer. We can't put engineers in these roles. So miraculously overnight, I bought 5 Canali suits. Every time somebody asked me a tech question, I pretended not to know. I don't know, but I have this really great person that does this. Let me buy you lunch and we can talk about it. Yeah. And I literally pretended that, and all of a sudden, Dolly was moving up at the leadership. They wanted to know that I wasn't focused on technology. But I had the same stumbling block, and that's what ultimately I needed to move into the Internet Business Solutions Group. I had to basically say, I don't really know tech. I know leadership, and it's pretty terrible. But, you hired a couple core leadership things. And one of them is to hire people smarter than you and with a different perspective. That's the first thing. And I took down a lot of notes because I do the same thing. I look for everybody to be smarter than me, but also that different perspective. Chris has got a totally different perspective than me, and I love that. Alonzo's more like me than probably anybody else on the team. I've got people that worked on nails in their team. I've got people that were economics professors on my team. I think the key is they don't think like you, because if they think like you, what innovation do you get? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I really like that you said was focus on your core strengths. I always teach people focus on their strength, but focus on your core strength. That's what separated you from everybody else. You related to people from all the years that I knew you. You instantly connected to people. You were honorable. You had great integrity. You were trustworthy. And then when you focused on you, that inquisitiveness in you and that leadership, to me, what I saw in you was magic, even 25 years ago. And you taught me so many things. You also said, get uncomfortable. You can't grow without it. Now, I come from mental toughness training world. Even bought training from Navy SEALs to build more mental toughness and, in martial arts, the things that we did. But we also work with a program we love called Cloud Heroes Africa. I love working with people in Africa, and we do a lot of relief work there, and there's nothing more rewarding.
Yeah.
And the motto of Cloud Heroes Africa is success is uncomfortable. And I really love that. Now, mental toughness, I trained this person, and he's the son I always wanted, to be honest. His name was Daniel Boso. He had paid $35,000 from some terrible boot camp that was supposed to help him level up in his career. And he had no skills whatsoever. And he was beaten down and he was saddened in life. And he came to me and he won a scholarship with us. And that kid fought harder than anybody I ever saw. I sent him back a paper 6 times. And the 5th time it was actually good. But I kept telling him it was not good enough. And here's why. The kid didn't finish high school. And I knew he had to be better. And I knew his gift was his mental toughness. And I was trying to get him to play to his strength, that he didn't believe in his strength. And I kept sending it back to me, turn something in. It was like, not good enough, not good enough. And he finally said, when's it going to be good enough? He said, when it's good enough, I'll tell you. And when it's good enough and I tell you, you'll be ready to be hired. And then JP Morgan Chase hired him. He didn't even graduate high school as a solution architect. Now, they were lucky to get him. Lucky. And the reason they were lucky is something you keyed upon. We only care about the A players.
Yeah.
The A players aren't the ones with the best education. They're not the ones that went to Harvard. They could have been. They might not be. They're not the ones that anything. They're the ones that are willing to play and focus all their strengths and energy into one thing until they win. And they're loyal too. So it's funny we both came from there. And I was going to tell you my background, and maybe I will for less than 2 minutes. It's the exact opposite of Alvin's.
Hey, do you want me to hold you to the less than 2 minutes?
Yeah, I'm going to hold it to less than 3 minutes.
Put the timer on, Chris. Put the timer on.
Big time.
Oh, I wish I could put a timer on the screen, but unfortunately I can't.
You can try it. So it's 6:38. So most people know I grew up very humble too. I worked full-time jobs as a firefighter, EMT/paramedic to pay my way through school while going to school full-time. And then while I was in school, that's great, Alonzo. While I was in school, I became a nurse, which I absolutely hated on my first day. I quit. I became a nurse practitioner, which I actually liked, but I just loved tech. And I went and got a whole bunch of certifications that in New Jersey nobody cared about. In the Bay Area those days, they would have. In New Jersey, they didn't. Then I started asking hiring managers what they want, wrote a master list, and became those things. Next thing I know, I was a senior network engineer. It was my first job. And then somehow, I was a principal engineer prior to joining Cisco at Riverstone Networks, at Comcast Networks. And then I was on the team with Alvin, and we were both kind of getting there. So the point is any of us can do it. It doesn't matter what your path is. There's no set path. The key is, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to learn? And do you get the advice from those that have worked in the industry? Or do you do the most scary thing, which I've ever seen, which is just post on LinkedIn? Hey, what skills do you think I should need for a job, and get answers from people that have never held the job before? And yes, LinkedIn is an incredible place to get a job, and you generally speaking don't even have to look for one if you build the right band. So I want to ask Alvin about things that he looks for in a perfect employee.
Yeah. For me, there has to be a couple of things, right? First, I look at their, a couple of things. Number one is their experience, what they bring to the table. Can they do the job? Is the first thing, right? They have to have some sort of expertise in that area. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of other skills I look for. And a lot of them are soft skills, right? Are they personable? Can they hold a conversation? Do they pay attention to the customer needs? Do they have a nice demeanor? Like when you're dealing with customers and partners, you can't get upset with people. You have to be able to be calm, regardless if what the situation is. I've had customers and partners be irate with me, yelling at me and dropping cuss words, but you have to be able to temper that and be calm about it and respectful, which is hard to do. And so those are like a lot of the things that I look for: organization skills, punctuality. Could they meet deadlines? Those are all very important things above knowledge. And there's sometimes, Mike, too, where I actually have had candidates that were more technically qualified, but I decided that I wanted to, do something else, go a different route based on somebody's soft skill, right? And some other things as well. So that's kind of another thing I look at as well. It's not always about how much knowledge you have from a technical perspective, but there's soft skills as well that may overcome.
Alvin, if I told you, and I get people hired every day, that it's less about their tech skills, are they competent enough to do the job? And what we find is it's the emotional intelligence, which you just keyed in on, the soft skills, their attitude, energy, and enthusiasm, because I can train you on something.
Exactly.
Most companies, we have the budget. You can send somebody to training. You can train them. You can mentor them. But you can't take someone without good integrity. And it's not the person that's got the best tech, because, 20 years ago it might have been, because the tech didn't work. And we needed those CCIs that we could lock in a basement, that you bring in pizza and you never let them get in front of the customers. And, I had a lot of friends with some of those guys. But in today's world, the tech's simple. But the cloud has 3 buttons. It's all about relating to people, at least from my perspective and all the hiring managers I speak to.
Right. Hey, Mike, what internet connection are you on? 1, 2, or 3?
You know what? Right now, I actually think I'm on my Verizon 5G. If I look at my IP address versus my AT&T fiber optic connection.
I'm just curious. You got a little blurry there. You're a little pixelated. So
I will switch back over to my fiber connection.
All right. I'm just curious. I figured out. There we go.
BGP nice. Converges fairly quickly.
There you go. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
I'm glad you did. We don't want to have me looking blurry, so
Being a referee isn't always about throwing penalty flags.
It is
no
not.
Flags on the play here.
So, Alvin, if you had a choice between someone that had 10 years experience that was bad versus someone with no experience that was incredibly competent, who would you hire?
The latter, obviously. Yeah. You need that confidence, right? And I've done that, actually, to be honest with you. Just recently, as a matter of fact, like roughly 6 months ago, we had a decision to make where we had 2 people. One person was an older person that had, close to 15 years experience, had all the systems and tools. But when we interviewed them, they told us about their skill set, but we didn't see the drive to help the evolution of where we need to go in the next 3 to 5 years. And then I hired this other guy who was 2 years out of college, who had a vision of where he wanted to go, but significantly less experience. And we went with the college guy because we figured we could train him on everything else, right? So there's an example of exactly what you're talking about, Mike. This guy had a vision. He was well-spoken. He was articulate. He presented himself well, and we hired him based on that.
I remember this Israeli was the beginning of my career, about 4 or 5 years before I met you. And I interviewed him. I'll call him Avi. That's not his real name. And I literally remember he came in. He was the nicest guy in the world. And I asked him a basic TCP/IP question, and he didn't know it. Now I needed a senior WAN engineer. And I went, well, okay. And I asked him something about frame relay he didn't know, private lines he didn't know. And then I went, okay, Shanor, what do you know? And he says, I know Windows NT. And he's explaining Windows NT 4.0. And I'm like, wow, this guy's smart. I'm like, so first I like his attitude, and I like his energy. Then I like his enthusiasm. I like his honesty. And he's really smart. And I remember going to my manager saying, Devendra, we need to hire him. And Devendra's like, what's his skill set? I'm like, well, I'll tutor him. So what's the skill set? Devendra, you don't need to be worried about this. What's the skill set? I'm like, he's really good with Windows network. And my manager's like, so what's that mean with regards to IP networks? I said, trust me, I'll train him. And my manager's like, well, it's on you. This thing turns into a disaster. You're going with him. I'm like, it won't be a disaster. last time I spoke to him, it was about 6 months ago. He's the CEO of a company that distributes Chromebooks to developing nations getting the hands of computers and those that could never have afforded it otherwise. If I didn't hire him, if my partner at work, Gary, didn't hire him, we didn't both go fight for him, he might not have even been there. And, it's all about the right person. At least to me.
Yeah.
Now, something else you mentioned is that you liked people with a different perspective, Alvin.
Yeah. I want to explain this because this is an important bullet point.
It is.
There's a couple of I've learned so when I worked at Cisco, I've been there for 15 years. I have a lot of contacts. So when I left, I could have easily hired my old team from Cisco to come and work at the new company with me. The problem with that is you tend to do similar processes and your thought logic is very similar to the way Cisco did it. But your industry may be different, right? And the processes don't necessarily fit that industry. And so our CEO, Jensen Huang, always tells us first principles. You have to think from first principles. Basically means use your experience, but at the same time, understand where you are. And so what I typically do is I like to hire people from different companies. So like today, if I look at my team, I have somebody that came from Hitachi Data Systems, I have someone that came from Cisco, I have someone that came from Seagate, I have other people from Dell. And so it's a very diversified team. And I like that because I have the opportunity to ask them questions. So if I'm designing a program, I could say, hey, I want to write this deal registration program. How did you guys do it at Dell? How did you guys do it at Seagate, et cetera, and get different perspectives. And then as a manager and leader, you could form kind of the strategy based off of everybody's feedback and implement it accordingly. So it's always good to diversify when hiring. And even as an employee, I tried to diversify when I was coming up as an individual contributor. I tried to diversify, right? I worked in the internet in service provider space. And then from there, I went to become an SE. Then from there, I went to become a manager. Then I went to worldwide strategy. Just different perspectives. It's always good to like build your background and your resume.
Yeah, and I like different people with different backgrounds. I mean, Chris comes from the hospitality industry. Alonzo comes from marketing and program management. I've got 2 business school professors on my team. I've got someone who's probably, I think, one of the most talented engineers, cloud architects I've ever seen, who came from that working on nails. She's one of the smartest and most capable I've ever seen. But the point is I like these different perspectives because someone that was born in Greece thinks a certain way. Someone that was born in Texas thinks a certain way. And I kind of want all of it to kind of guide me through not being the same as me. I don't want everybody like me because if so, we come to the same solution.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, that guy from Philadelphia thinks a little bit different than that guy from Mississippi, right, Mike?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need that because me who was born in Philadelphia, thinks differently than someone who's growing up in Mississippi. And that's a good thing because otherwise, Chris went to the same school as me and we knew each other since we were 12 and we went to the same restaurants each day. We'd be basically thinking like the same person.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't have Chris to say, Mike, how about all these things that you didn't think of?
Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's always fun to say, hey, Mike, no. No, Mike.
And that's a really good point that Chris brought up. And Alvin, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Chris, who's my chief operating officer, can say to me, no, really bad idea. Don't do this. And I'm going to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I listen to my team all the time. I think I know something and then they correct me and I'm like, I think about it, I'm like, you're right. And so I adjust my thought logic accordingly.
So, here's where it gets interesting. And here's where Alvin and I started to work on some things together. When I was working on Alvin's team and Alvin helped me move into management, I'll always be grateful. He had asked me to mentor this kid. We'll call him Carell. I won't mention his last name. And he goes in, he's like, just go talk to the kid. And I met the kid and he was wearing this lime green shirt. And he was about as clumsy as can be. Somebody else met with him. And I remember meeting this kid and taking him for steaks. And I just really liked him. I really liked him. And Alvin and I both coached him. Now, he went from a junior role where he was a junior engineer to a senior sales specialist within about 6 months, which was like jumping like 4 levels. And we're not even going to talk about the difference in salary because it was dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's an account manager at Google 20 years later. And I remember that Alvin and I just saw something in him. And that was something that I think is a key to good managers. It's a key to good coaches. And Alvin saw something in me. And my gift is I can look at somebody, figure out exactly what their strength is, exactly where they're going to be most successful, and figure it out and say, do that. Now, for the next person, it's going to be something entirely different. Yeah, you. Wow, you've got this hidden, undiscovered talent. You do this. This is where you're going to be successful. But I saw Alvin do that years ago, too.
Wow. That's a strong capability to be able to discover that latent ability to do the job, and then you all can like add that extra layer of competency layer, but that underlining foundation is something it seems like you have to have it. It's something that you can't teach.
I think you can, some of it you can teach, but some of it you can. I think that being able to look at someone, finding that untapped potential, because I find there's just so many really smart people and they have untapped potential because maybe the way they present themselves, people don't see them a certain way. Maybe the way they communicate, people don't see them. Maybe they're the kind of person that likes to be behind the scenes that everybody always overlooked because they were behind the scenes.
Mm.
One of those really analytical types that's super smart, that inside them is pure genius that the world just doesn't see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Along these same lines, Alvin said something earlier that made me think back to an experience that I had. Alvin, you were talking about when you realized that you wanted to do more than engineering. You wanted to make that change, and I guess that next step. I'm not sure how you would describe it, but you went to your manager. You went to your boss, and they were honest with you.
Yeah.
And that's I had a similar experience when I was younger. Right out of college, I did HR for 2 years, and that didn't work out for me. I'm not an HR guy. And so when I left that role, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I got a job at a State Farm office in the town that I lived, and the agent, the owner of the office, when he brought me on board, he said, "Look, I know you may not know what you want to do. I'm bringing you on, giving you the opportunity. If at any point you realize that this is not what you want, and that you don't have the passion for this, and that this isn't what you want to do, come to me and we'll work something out."
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold, 6 months later, I came to him and I said, "This is not what I want to do. I don't have the passion." And he worked with me, both like an exit strategy and also on a personal level, just trying to help me figure out, okay, what did I like? What did I not like? What skills do I have best at, and where those might fit, and what type of role and what type of career. But it just made me think of when you were talking about your experience going to your manager and they were honest with you, saying, you may want to do something else, which was probably a lot of managers may not have done that. So It's kind of in the same vein of what we were just talking about, that I don't know what that quality is, but that quality in a boss or in a manager is what I think everybody should hope that they get to work with. And it exemplifies itself in so many different ways, and those are just 2 ways off the top of my head.
I think you've got to have faith in your manager and trust them. I'll tell you how much faith and trust I had in Alvin. When I worked for Alvin actually helped me get on a much more strategic team inside the company. And he helped groom me for this team. And literally what happened is I interviewed with the vice president that ran the team, and he went and called Alvin and said, "I'm hiring Mike. So get Mike off of any project that's going to be taking long term." So I was supposed to report to this guy named Nick, who was Greek just like me. And Nick couldn't remember which N was up. He was just sloppy with paperwork. He was incredibly smart and incredibly capable, but with paperwork, it was pretty bad. So a month later, I'm still not on the team. 2 months later, I'm still not on the team. 3 months later, I'm still sitting around coaching the team on anything unrelated to tech. 4 months later, I'm still not working. 5 months later, I'm literally calling Alvin. I'm like, Alvin, I don't know what to do here. I'm like, you can't pay me forever to do nothing. But I mean, what should I do? And I remember you had me call that vice president, and you're like, and you told me what to say. And I said it to him. And the next thing I realized, I was on 16 interviews in like 6 different countries. And then then the manager says, well, would you like to report to me instead? And I was like, that's the only way I'm joining your team at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that.
Well, I think you were going to go down the direction. I wasn't sure.
No, I was just going to make a comment on Chris's point. The one thing too, I recall one of my toughest decisions in my career that I had to make was deciding if I was going to leave Cisco to go to this startup. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this because some of you are going to come across this in your career. I was making good money at that time. I was probably doing about $250K working for Cisco. Big company, great reputation. Did really well. And I was taking a drastic pay cut down to 180K from 256. And so but the difference was I was getting it was a pre-IPO company, and I was getting a decent amount of shares, which would have made up for that. And then the question came up, but I was getting a director title too, which is important to understand. Mm-hmm. So I had to make a decision. And I remember that was like one of the hardest decisions I kept contemplating because it was a lot. I mean, that's not chump change. That's a lot of money. It's $60,000 delta, right? And I'm betting on the come. I'm assuming that when they go public, that they're going to do well, and I'm going to be able to cash out. And what ended up happening is I thought to myself, I talked to my wife, and I was telling her the whole situation, and she said to me, you should go and take the risk because the probability of you doing well at that company will help your career long term. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, you have a good reputation, you could go back to your old company. Worst case scenario. And so I left with the logic that I would make senior director there one day, right, based on my performance. And that ended up happening, and then the career kind of went from there. But the point of the story is this. Are you willing to take sacrifices in your career for prosperity in the long run, right? You have to, whenever you make a career choice, you have to make a calculated risk on company. Like when I go to a company, I do all sorts of research. Like before I came to NVIDIA, I looked at the market, what the total addressable market was, who are the competitors of AI, what's their go-to-market strategy, who are the partners, I went to Glassdoor. If never you heard of Glassdoor is amazing. I went to go research what the people that work for the company are saying about the company. And I do a lot of homework before I go to a certain company. And that's also an important skill you want to do is get used to the tools out there, LinkedIn, Glassdoor. They'll help you make decisions on which are companies that are up and coming, and then industry trends, IDC reports. Those are other big things that are important to understand as well. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point that I think it's important to understand if you're, like when you're moving, it's okay to take a step back if you're going to take 2 steps forward.
Yeah, and it's funny. That's exact in the scenario that I just talked about. That's exactly what I did as well. Obviously, insurance, selling insurance, State Farm, great base, and then commissions on top of that. In a small town in Mississippi, there's not a lot of agents, so you got the business. Yeah. And but I didn't want to do it. I wasn't passionate. I was not enjoying it at all. So I made the decision to take a cut, but move into something that I knew that I was going to enjoy, and ended up doing for the next 12 years.
Right.
until apparently the only thing that can kill the hospitality industry is a worldwide pandemic. Who knew? So, but yeah, so I completely agree with what you said there about you have to, everybody's going to have that choice to make at some point, whether it's early in their career, middle of their career, later on in their career, that you've got to be able to do an analysis of the entire picture. And at that time, I was in my 20s. So taking a step back in my 20s for long-term return over the next 60 years, that was an easy decision for me. I'm a very analytical guy. That was the long-term returns for that.
Yeah.
And I did it too. I remember I worked at WorldCom, and truthfully, I loved the job. This was real hardcore networking, internet service provider world. And then I met the executives at WorldCom. So I called Christina Marino from ITXL and had 2 job offers on the same day. One was for a company called Knight Securities. One was HSBC Bank. So I went with Knight Securities because it was in New Jersey, and I thought that was going to be easier to get to than New York City. Well, this job basically was a 6-figure plus raise from my first job. It's 6 o'clock at night. We could take the limousine home. So at 5 o'clock, we'd all go to the bar. We'd all have some steaks and some wine and some scotch. We'd take the limo home. But I was miserable. I had a great manager, but driving 2 to 3 hours a day to New York, getting in there and having those people talk to each other the way they did, it was a curse this, curse that, curse the other thing. And I'd get home and it was like, oh, I'm making great money, but I was miserable.
Yeah.
And I left there to go to a cable company for a 6-figure plus pay cut where I was miserable, and went to Riverside Networks, which got me in the vendor space. I rode that company. I did great, till they had a director of systems engineering's open. And my managers, I had spoken, there were 2 managers. I spoke to the one manager and she says, Mike, yeah, you're the perfect fit for this role. And I called the other manager and he says, you're too valuable in your current role. You can't move up. Well, a week later, I was at Cisco. And I said, you're telling me that because I've done too good, I can't move up? And he said, yeah, stinks, doesn't it? And I said, not for long. He's like, what do you mean? So I went to the competition. I went to Cisco. And that was pretty much where I retired from because I loved it so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Leaving Cisco was not easy, and I had to for physical reasons because I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
But, not being able to walk, I was still trying to hobble into Cisco. I was still trying to, drive to the Fort Lauderdale telepresence thing and use crutches to get in and out of it so I could still talk to people. I loved it at Cisco.
Yeah, Mike, I was thinking, when we were talking about Corel and the mentorships, one thing that I, by the way, I mentor quite a bit of people till today. It's actually funny. I get random people on LinkedIn just send me messages and say, hey, Alvin, I've been following your career and I would love to, for you to mentor me, which I think is pretty cool. So I spend the time to talk to people quite a bit. And what I always tell people nowadays, I think mentors are good to have, but a board of directors is better to have.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I mean by that is like, you could use, for example, if someone uses me to do like a mentorship, I usually connect them with 3 or 4 other people to get different perspectives because my strengths are going to be different from Mike's strengths, which is different from Chris's strengths and different from Alonzo's strengths, right? And between the 4 of us, we will make you a superhero, right? Yep. Because we all bring the different strengths and you got to pull the best of everyone from that. And so that's important to understand is as you're building your careers and you're working always, till today I have a board. Mm-hmm. I work with people at Cisco and I have friends at Pure Storage that I bounce ideas off of. Even till today at my level, I still have different people that I work with because you can't know everything because there's new technologies coming to you. Like I'm doing a cloud program right now, an adoption program with AWS, Azure, and GCP, but I've never worked at their companies. So I have to leverage people that I know at those companies to help me with the strategy, right? And so that's important to have is a board. And then another thing too that I mentioned is around focusing your strengths, and Mike reiterated that. There's a good book out there called Strength Finder. I think it's Strength Finder 2.0 by Tom Rath. For those of you that don't know your strengths, that's probably a good place to start. There's a CD that comes with it, and it asks you a bunch of questions, and it kind of tells you what your strengths are, and based on your personality and all that kind of stuff as well. So I always recommend, aside from getting mentors, working with companies like Go Cloud Go Cloud Careers, and looking at books is probably a good way to help round out your career.
It's interesting. Alvin keyed on something very specific. I train architects, but any tech professional in general, where people go wrong, and Alvin was a CCIE. You still keep your CCIE current?
No.
And there's a reason for it, because in order to get to your future, you have to let go of your past. But when it comes to these big architecture roles or any of these big tech leadership roles, it's not about how good you are at the tech. That's the recipe for disaster. It's how good you are at building relationships, how good your network is, what kind of a team can you build, and can you bring in 100 experts that each have 20 years of experience, or are you crazy enough to think you can do it yourself? There's two kinds of people. At the end of the African expression, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I mean, let's be fair. The biggest strength for a really good tech professional is not their tech skills. It's their ability to build that. And I've got a board of directors from me. Andrea, I call periodically. I'd call Alvin. I have a buddy, Daryl, who's also been on the show one day. Francis, my executive coach now, who was my mentor 20 years ago. I have a board. And I call those board periodically to make sure I'm going in the right direction. I also call Chris. Chris, what do you think? I call Alonzo too.
I tell you no. That's all I'll do. That's all I'll do is I'll tell you no.
I'll even call this super smart 25-year-old Chow on my team and say, Chow, what do you think? She's 25 years old, and I go to her for perspective.
That's the cool thing about it. You have a quantitative and qualitative approach that we always cross-pollinate with each other so that we can get a really enriching and objective perspective to it.
Well, it goes back to the diverse, what we were talking about having diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
Whether it be from a different company or whether it be from a different culture or from a different life. Like my growing up wasn't the same as Alvin's, so my entire 36 years is a completely different accumulated amount of knowledge and experience and reactions and intuition than Alvin's, and then different than Alonzo's, and different than the kid that I grew up next to. I mean, even though we grew up on the same street, we ultimately ended up having different experiences. So it goes back to that. But I also have a board, but and Alvin briefly mentioned it earlier. I don't know if she's on your board or if she was on your board, but my wife is on my board.
Yeah.
My dad's
Mine too.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned in the chat box about that it was good to hear that you included her in your decisions. Yeah. Well, you have to. You got to include significant others and anyone that might be impacted by your any decisions that you're making, just like you would at work. You have to talk with the stakeholders.
Right.
But yeah, the wife is on my board. She has a pretty senior role. But
the senior role. Consistently.
No, the cat has the most senior role.
Yeah.
But don't you think, say for instance, Alvin, as you continue to grow in your role, grow in your experience, you're going to have to, in essence, grow your board of directors as well. Some people may have to get swapped out. Either you have to shrink or expand that according to what your goals are.
Yeah, because as you progress in your career, right, your board has to progress above you, right? So, like for example, if you're an individual contributor just starting your career, your board may be like a security network engineer, maybe a cloud architect, and maybe a manager at AWS or whatever it is. But then once you hit manager, now your next level is director. So you got to kind of get a new level and perspective if that's your progression in your career, right? Mm-hmm. So I've always evolving. And not only that, but what happens is after, there's only so long you can spend with somebody where you learn everything about them, then you kind of need to move on to the next person and learn the next set of strategies, right?
Yeah.
So that's important as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's growth. I mean, it's just natural growth.
You know, I had mentioned it early on. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. The moment you start laying back in your laurels or whatever experiences, that's when it's definitely time to go.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a question. I was just breezing through the chat window. There was a question by Angelo that asked, how can we help someone develop drive to achieve when they don't have it?
Yeah.
And so, you know, the thing is with drive, it all depends on your circumstance and your personal experience, is my belief. In my case, what happened was a couple of things. Number one, when I didn't get into any colleges and my cousins got into a lot of colleges and we did family parties, I would always get criticized for going to community college, and I saw the disappointment in my parents' face. And so I wanted my parents to be proud of me, and I wanted to for lack of a better word, but have honor, right, for them. And so I worked to get there. That was my driving my motivational factor was that alone. And then secondarily, I think what happened to me when I got to Cisco, it's a very sales culture, and there's always awards that are given, and you want to be that guy that gets that award too, right? You want to be recognized as a top person. And I think what my mindset changed, what became more important to me over money was respect of my colleagues, right? And being on stage and winning. And I got to tell you guys, when I won the award for Manager of the Year, when I went on stage with John Chambers, he shook my hand and he said to me, congratulations on being the best of the best, right? And I remember when I walked off stage, there was a pool of people waiting for me at the bottom of the stage, greeting me and congratulating me. And throughout that sales conference, I was at a sales conference, and I remember the day clearly. We were in Vegas. Wherever I walked, I felt like I was a president of the United States, because everyone kept coming up to me and shaking my hand and congratulating me and saying, "Hey, this is great." So for me, those are kind of like the motivational factors. And so, Angelo, to answer your question, you have to find deep within yourself what motivates you. Is it your family? Is it respect for yourself? Is it you want to make more money? Is it you have to provide for your family? Everybody has a story, and everybody gets motivated by different mechanisms. And so you just got to find out what your story is.
And that's really the key. We are all motivated by something different.
Yeah.
And if you're not motivated by what you're doing in your current job, it's the wrong job. Go find something that you're truly passionate about. And something Alvin said, and I always talk to people, he was willing to take a pay cut to get to his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did complete and total retraining. I spent $40,000 to transition from tech and from some internal medicine to tech. And I didn't think I was going to get paid anywhere near the same. But it was my love. And when you're truly passionate about something, it's almost effortless. It's almost effortless. I remember watching Alvin care for his beautiful little girl, Isabel. And I remember her dancing to the Doodle Bops. And she was, no matter what amount of effort it took to take care of her, Alvin and Rita were willing to do it. That little girl, because of that level of care and level of love. I mean, my wife, who likes cats, was like, wow, if we could have a daughter like Isabel, I'd have children. I mean, because it was the amount of effort and passion you guys put into her. She was special then, and she's special now.
Yeah.
But it's got to follow your passion. If it doesn't, it's just going to torture you. Believe me, I've had jobs that paid well that tortured me, and I didn't last very long. I quit.
Right. Exactly.
It's kind of because from the different perspective, my original passion and love was for graphic design, creating, designing, putting together really awesome commercials, caricatures, things of that nature. I was really, really into it. I couldn't see myself doing anything else until I hit that wall of working at ad agencies. You're 9 to 5s that's a myth. We're at the think tanks at 12, 3 in the morning, having to present 4 hours later, and I just got burned out. And I was wondering, what I don't see anything else. What is going to be my passion? I thought this was what I was going to do for the rest of my life, and that was not the case. And so I did a lot of internal soul searching. I wanted to get that feeling back. I wanted to be able to say that I'm proud to be somewhere. And so going through that sojourn of understanding marketing, digital marketing, and that footprint of project management and how does this tech work? How am I able to realize that? And it got me to that path. So find, all that to say is that find something that you really like. And even if it's something peripheral, there is going to be a pathway to get you to something that's going to spark that drive again, just like tech did for me. And being able to help people be able to strategize, find solutions, and move forward into something that really makes you proud, really gives you that, even if it's not financial. If it's financial, even great, even better. But I think that with that passion, the finances will speak for themselves over time.
Oh yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I always have a tough time with questions like this because it doesn't register with me. Like, the second half of that doesn't register. Like, I can't fathom people not having the desire to achieve something. I mean, obviously I've seen it. I've dealt with it. I've been responsible for teams and individuals, so I've seen it. But I always struggle with this question, or similar questions, because it's at the end of the day. Alvin said that you have to find out what it's for you. Yeah. But if you're a leader, you've got to find out what it is for 50 people.
Yeah.
You've got to find out what it is for 100 people, or whatever that number might be. And that's the difficult part, is being able to make that connection and get that familiarity with your team. Again, I'm looking at it from a different perspective. That's, as a leader, being able to find that. And I think we've talked about this before. It's on other shows. Knowing your team well enough to be able to figure out what drives them. And unfortunately, you do have some people that there's not anything that drives them, and that's when it becomes a little difficult. But
antithesis of the energizer.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, you generally have to manage those out of the business, because otherwise what will happen is the good employees will work twice as hard until they quit. One last thing that I will say, Angelo, is a lot of times, especially if you're the leader, you've got to have the emotional intelligence and the empathy to really see if you can get things from the person's perspective. Do they have a problem going on with their family? Because sometimes that's it. And the other thing is, do they have a health issue? Yeah. Sometimes people that are depressed don't have the energy, enthusiasm, or passion to do things that they normally even like. Yeah. Is there some other struggle they're going with? So, I like whenever I'm struggling to work with somebody, to try and see what's going on. Is there something physically, mentally, health-wise that's in the way? Or, can I communicate with them empathetically and figure out what it is? Or, I hate to say it, and in most cases you can work with it, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes you've got to say, this person is just not going to do the job. And as much as I'd like to keep them around, I can't torture my other employees filling up the gap, because then your good employees leave. And then you've got nobody, and you've got a low-performing team, and the only thing you can do is quit and get a new job. And the new manager comes in and basically replaces everybody on your team.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I could give you two different perspectives of this. When I was an SE at Cisco, I had a manager that was managing me, and whenever I had an idea, he would ask me 100 questions. Well, who's your audience? Who are you going to do this for? What's your outcome? What's this? What's that? And it got to the point where he asked so many questions where I thought to myself, you know what? Don't even bother coming up with another idea, right? And I just kind of went into my hole. And I was on his team. I was in probably stack ranked in the middle or lower half of the team. 3 years later, we got a new manager, same team, same initiatives, but new manager. And I gave this guy some ideas that I had. He says, that sounds like a great idea. Go run with it and let me know if you need any help. And so I did my first project, and I made a mistake on it. And he said, hey, Alvin, you did a great job. Here's a few things I would have done differently, if I were in your shoes. And it was just a really positive feeling coming out of that. And so then I did my second project and it went well. And then I started doing the third, and he kept encouraging me. And what was interesting, I'll tell you guys, right, in those first 3 years, I think I may have won 1 award. And when that new manager took over, I think I won 8 right after. It was something like that. It was astronomical. And he was the one who helped coach me get my first manager job. So the point I'm trying to make is managers will make or break you. You have to be encouraging to your staff. And to Mike's point, you have to be empathetic at the same time. You really have to understand where they're coming from. And that's also some other factors you may want to consider as well.
Yeah. And to put it in I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. The immediate thought that comes to mind is it's a long game, but that's not, it's not, what I'm trying to say is it's not something that you can just do at on the spot. You can't just be empathetic on the spot. You can't just care about them on the spot. It has to be you have to, because if you try to be empathetic on the spot, you're not going to get anywhere. If the manager that had been asking you 100 million questions every time you brought something, all of a sudden had an epiphany and realized that, oh, Alvin, I think Alvin's having a struggle, and he came to you and tried to be empathetic, you would not be receptive to it, because you've had 3 years of experience of the other. So it goes back to the emotional intelligence that we always talk about, to build those relationships. And
there's an interesting question here that Pavan asked around what's the perception of firms in terms of hiring talent, especially in the cloud computing expertise in the recession, and what's your take on the recession? Will it be harsh? So I could tell you, I am in touch with executive levels at Microsoft, Google, and AWS. We're doing a tremendous, and even OCI, which is Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, for those of you guys that don't know. They also are like an AWS, but at a much smaller scale. There are still a lot of opportunity in the cloud space. And as a matter of fact, I think it's going to pick up even more during recession. If you think about it, what do the cloud providers offer? They offer hosting, they offer uptime, they offer the ability to kind of outsource, quote unquote, your IT team, your IT organization to some degree. And that's gonna, when recession happens, people look for ways to save costs. And so that's gonna continue to grow. I think the AWSs, the GCPs, Azures are gonna continue to grow. They may not grow at rapid pace like they have in the past, but I do think they are gonna grow. When I look at our teams at NVIDIA, we are still hiring in the cloud. We're still hiring in the global system integrator organization. So there's definitely going to be some growth. As far as the recession is concerned, it's hard to tell, right? Because it really depends on how high the interest rates go. And it's interesting because when I've been investing in the market since the 80s, and fundamentals are not always the same, right? No. I thought, for example, when we had a global pandemic, I thought the whole market was going to come crashing down for at least a couple of years until the pandemic was done. And it came crashing down for 3 or 4 days, and the thing went rocket up, which nobody anticipated, right? So the markets are so hard to predict, but it does play an international role as your dollar gets stronger, because as your dollar gets stronger, then it makes it higher costs for companies or countries like Brazil, China, et cetera, to buy. So rise in interest rates affects the dollar, which ultimately affects the international economy. So it will be tough to say. I do think there's spurts of growth happiness that's happening. You're starting to see some companies report good earnings, and then you're starting to see some companies offer layoffs. Intel just announced a 20% cut. Twilio announced a 10% cut. So it just really depends on the market. But I do think overall the cloud market is going to be favorable moving forward for years to come, in my opinion.
And I agree with you, Alvin, on the cloud. But, we're already in a recession.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's CPI data is going to give us some information. Now, when you
No,
look at
tomorrow's GDP, not CPI.
I'm sorry, GDP.
We already got CPI. That wasn't pretty.
Yeah, no, the last CPI data showed inflation still has not stabilized. And I think the Fed has to raise rates. Now, it's interesting because the economy just produced such bad data that people, the thought was that the Fed will stop raising rates, so people started buying equities again. So what I think is I agree with you in the cloud space, but Alvin, I don't know about you. I think more people the hiring companies are going to hire more revenue producing positions, such as architects and things. Correct. And I personally think they're going to outsource engineering positions to places like India and other places.
Yep.
Because engineers cost money. So in a recession, you hire cloud architects, you hire solution architects, you hire sales reps, business development managers, channel people, all people that bring in money. And you lay off your engineers and you rehire engineers in lower cost of living places.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let me. I'm going to get to some more questions here. This one is from Lady Godiva. I'm guessing this one is for Alvin.
I think it is for Alvin.
What is the best part of your job?
Yeah, for me, over the years, I've realized the reason why I became a manager is because I wanted to share my experiences of what I've learned over the years with other people and watch them prosper. So for me, I am proud to say that many people that work for me have prospered into CEOs, vice presidents, senior directors. Some of them have surpassed me, which is fantastic. I love that. And so for me, the journey is the reward. I love watching people do better than me, seeing their careers be successful is kind of the best part of my job.
Love that.
Sounds
Alvin.
familiar.
Sounds very familiar. That's why I'm here doing what I'm doing, because I love people being more successful than me. I had my success. It was fun. Now let's train the next generation of technology leaders.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's piggyback on that and a topic that we talked about a little bit earlier, but we'll bring it back up. Tech Fixer asks, what are the key facets, tangible or intangible, that you look for when considering adding a new member to the team?
Yeah, I mean, some of the tangible stuff I look at is, how do they present themselves? Are they polished? Do they come prepared for the interview? Do they have references? All these type of things. It kind of your basic 1, 2, 3. You'd be surprised a lot of people do that. And another thing you'll be surprised about is after the interview, a lot of people don't send thank you notes. Incredible. I actually pay attention to thank you notes, believe it or not. So
you hear it here, everybody. Send a thank you.
Yeah.
That's one thing. I'm old school, so I have a cover letter. I have a resume. I have 3 references. When I'm done with the interview, I get everybody's email. I send a thank you note. I send the key points of the interview, which shows that I'm paying attention. So that's definitely one thing.
Oh, so you don't just send one or expect one sentence. You actually expect
right. Thank you for the interview.
I actually take notes during the interview, and I customize each letter based on the interview. And I say, here's the 3 points that we covered. And then I reiterate them, and then I close out on how I would help or whatever.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Could you say that one more time, Alvin?
Alvin, I love this because we tell this to our students.
Conversation about you being an adjunct professor for us.
Yeah, we probably need to have that conversation, but we have our students we teach this to our students. And here's the thing, it's the old school stuff the elite level is looking for. They're looking for the charm, the charisma. Do you look somebody in the eye? Or are you going to make somebody else feel good in your presence? Notice Alvin didn't even list the tech thing yet.
Yeah.
He didn't even mention it. It's the competency thing. You have to have competency. Now, Alvin, if somebody has 1,000,001 certifications, do you care?
Yeah. Wait, sorry, what was the question, Mike?
If someone has 1,000,001 certifications, do you care?
No. I think that to me, certification is kind of like baseline that you know the material.
Yeah.
But that's not going to actually get you the job.
No.
Right? It's
No.
your soft skills of being able to communicate effectively, your personality. Could be writing skills depending on what the role is. There's just a lot of different factors that you have to look at, and those are kind of like the intangibles, things that we look at.
And to me, after helping people with their careers for 20 years, and I'll ask you if you found the same thing, to me, when people are trying to move up, they want to focus on the tech, but it's not the tech, it's the soft skills, the leadership skills, the sales skills, the CXO relevancy, the executive presence. In my experience, that's the thing that keeps people from moving up, is they focus on their old life instead of their new life, which is how do I be a better leader?
Yeah, exactly.
I was actually going to ask a question up for myself. Sorry to jump ahead of everybody that's in the chat box, but Mike opened the window for me. But I made a note that earlier when you were talking about you decided that you wanted to move past engineering. What was necessary for you to move from that into the type of roles that you wanted? What did you not have already, or may have only just started, getting, as far as knowledge and skills? What did you need to make that jump?
The thing is when you become a manager, like an engineering manager, you start getting less into the tech. It's more about how do you operationalize your team and build a strategy, right? Of what needs to happen in the accounts. So even though as a SE manager, I wasn't technical, I was more about how do we enable the system? How do we develop the partner? What are the metrics? How do we create new processes? These type of things. All those skills are transferable to other skills, like being a project manager, being a business development. It's kind of the same thing. You're just learning a new type of go-to-market, for example. And so I gained those skills through classes. A lot of times when I first became a manager, there was manager classes I took. I got mentors, people helped me. My boss was tremendous at the time and told me, things I need to work on, or here's some of the things you need to leverage, etc. I think a lot of those skills that I've learned transferred over to this next role of more business development.
So what I'm hearing is you use relevant skills from your past experience. Even though you're not going into an engineer role, you use relevant skills from that role and this new role in these new roles. Okay.
Sounds like some pretty awesome
transferable skills.
Transferable skills, which we talk about. Here's the funny thing. Alvin, I worked for you. About a year and a half before I worked for you, there were 5 multicast experts in the world, and I was one of them. And I was traveling hundreds of thousands of miles to go talk about multicast. I was setting up fiber and video to the home in Dubai. Did you even know that I was technical when I worked for you?
No, you're a bit more of a business guy.
Yeah. And that was the key. When I wanted to move up in my career, I had to hide the tech because it was holding me back. And the manager before you was like, look, you want to get ahead? You can't if you're going to hold on to the tech. Yeah. You wouldn't even have known. I think I was credit card boy working. I spent more time as credit card buy and client entertainment.
Exactly. There's some other interesting questions here I'm reading, if you don't mind.
Pop them up in the chat box so people can see them.
So like Elizabeth James, right, has one around thank you notes, right?
Here we go.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, for this one, typically I only send the people that are interviewing me because nobody else would randomly know you may be interviewing, right? Yeah. Unless you have a personal relationship with somebody, then like if they made a reference, then you could send a thank you note to them for referring you as an example. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, throughout my career, I've only sent thank you notes to people that have actually interviewed me for taking the time out of their busy day. So that's kind of how I manage that one.
And that's the key.
On this. Say that.
That's the key. It's taking time out of somebody's busy day. Right. I'm going to ask you another question because many people go on interviews and they get told come back when you're more experienced. Would you ever interview anybody that you didn't think could do the job? Would you spend your time interviewing anybody that no? So come back when you have more experience. Would you consider that to be a euphemism? They botched the interview and you don't want to make them feel bad? I mean, I'm honest with people. I don't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Alvin, this is a bit of a joke. Do you have a cookie jar in your office?
Yeah,
or a candy dish.
A candy dish?
yeah.
Okay, so
So,
Alvin
Mike-
didn't see that. When I moved
Yeah.
on to other bigger roles and I used to interview people, as soon as somebody would lie to me, I didn't want to listen to another word they said. So I used to have a cookie jar filled with cookies. Now I think, you don't know, I don't even cook cookies. And I was handing cookies the second they would start lying. Here, have a cookie, have a cookie. And so I could walk them out the room.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
funny.
and we found out on a previous show. We had my former college advisor on here, and we were talking about that. And she's like, "Yeah, that's why I have a candy dish in my office." And I'm like, "Oh, that's why we have a candy dish in the office." It was because every time somebody like me came in and asked us a question, and you said, "Did you read the syllabus?"
You
give
have
me
a
a
cookie or have some candy. Give your mouth something more positive to do, I guess.
So we got a question from another one from Tech Fixer from earlier. He asked, "Do you have any books that made an impact upon you that you would recommend?"
Yeah, I've read a couple of them. Right, I've done the Strength Finder is a really good one. I recommend for everybody. Good to Great. I think that's by Tom Collins. Was a pretty good book, pretty popular in the industry. Made to Stick is fairly recent book. It's a pretty good one around management styles of coming up with strategy and how you stick with them and you don't get deterred from that. Move My Cheese was another one I think I've read.
Yeah, it was a good book.
Yeah, Move My Cheese was a good one. So those are probably like 4 that I could think of off the top of my head that I looked at.
And I'll give you mine. I used to read 3 books a week for about 20 years, but I've got some that stick out. One is The Art of War.
Yeah.
I use The Art of War every day when it comes to strategy. I still think it's the best book of all time. And another one that I really, really loved was Why Business People Speak Like Idiots. It was given to me by my good friend Frances Dare. She's my executive coach now.
Oh,
she saw me speak in front of, I used to lead a CIO council at Cisco. She saw me speak about them, and they were looking like this the whole time. And I asked her, I said, "Frances, what I do, I used every buzzword I learned in my MBA." And then she sent me that book and taught me how to communicate simply. And, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell.
Stop cheating.
Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. Because everybody does things differently. I kind of work with my gut a lot. And that book was recommended to me to a SEAL that I knew. And the SEAL said, mandatory reading to learn how to work with your gut and use your intuition. And that book was really good for me. But I mean, I read everything, mostly macroeconomics and psychology, sociology, NLP. But those books stand out to me as key things for anybody's career.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, let's might as well keep it going. Alonzo, give me 3 books. You got 3 books, Alonzo?
I definitely one of the ones is 48 Laws of Power. I love that. I love Book of the 5 Rings. I love that. And one of the overlaps that Mike and we talk about is Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I'm a strategist. I love strategy. I love to think about what's the next move. What is the second, or what are 2 or 3 moves that we can make past that initial action? What are the possibilities if they move left? What are we going to do right? It's a lot about like martial arts that Mike and we really talk about. When you have a strike, are you going to parry? Are you going to do left or right? What's going to happen after that next action? Are you going to do a kick? Are you going to position yourself for a takedown? What are you going to be your responses to that? And you can equate that to the job market, to the people in the office that you have to have a positive or difficult conversation about. What are they going to be their responses, and how are we going to create an environment where we're going to come out on top as the winners, as a representative for the company, or how are we going to position ourselves to get something even better out of that and turn that lemons into lemonades, even broken eggs into omelets. And that's what I really like to do.
Right on. Yeah, Chris, there's an important question I want to address by Lady Godiva, which
Yes,
is
yeah, I had that one synced up in
Okay.
the list. Let me go to it. The women in tech.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an important question. There's definitely an increase in women in tech, without a doubt, across the board, in data science, in pre-sales engineering, in program management. So I have a team, to give you guys an idea, I have a team of 60 people. 40 of them are women, believe it or not. And it's not that I did it on purpose. I tried to balance, but it just happened they were the best ones when I was interviewing. So there's definitely an uptake. And then not only that, but in general, most companies will have different networks. So like there's a women in tech network at most companies, and there's initiatives by HR to hire more women into tech. In channels where I work, there's something called, we work with a company called CRN, Channel Reseller News. It's very popular if you go to crn.com. And there's women of the channel, right, that are listed. And so there is if you're a woman, actually, there's a good probability of you doing pretty well in tech because, in some cases, people are looking for diversity.
Yeah.
So great question, Lady Godiva. Rest assured, there's definitely opportunities, lots of opportunities for women.
Yeah, I've had some good discussions with Lady Godiva. She's intelligent, smart,
Very smart.
on her feet. She really knows how to articulate and tell a story. So I think she's not going to have any problems there.
I don't think she'll have any problem. I know her. She's well-spoken, super smart, super capable, and has the best attitude and is super likable. She's going to be hired by anybody.
And she's got a mean swing at Top Golf as well during our careers.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
All right, so let's.
She takes better photos with a camera phone than I do with a $5,000 professional camera with a $2,000 lens on it.
So Ella asked, "What's the best way to highlight your soft skills, and how can you improve and expand on them?"
This is mostly my world, and then we'll go to Alvin because I've studied this for about 20 years. You demonstrate your soft skills by the way you communicate with others. Do you look them in the eye? When you speak, do you listen? Do you repeat back what they said to you? When they're talking to you, what's their body language telling you? And are you keying into reading their body language to say something there? Do you identify the person who is a visual, auditory, and kinesthetic when you speak to them? So you know how to communicate them. Now, when you're dealing with like someone like me or Alonzo, you sense that they're visionary leaders. Don't talk numbers to us and statistics. Of course, we're going to go nuts. But when you talk to Chris, you identify him in about 30 seconds as an analytical type. And if you don't give him numbers, facts, and figures, he's going to want to kick you out of the room. So part of that's being able to read and communicate to the right people. People that are really process-oriented and methodical, you got to give them a step-by-step thing, and they're going to get there. So you got to read them. Now, when the person's talking to you, do you match their vocal tone? Do you mirror their body language? So it's about training. I got to tell you, I've, realistically speaking, probably well over $100,000 of soft skills training, and I wasn't born with them. In fact, at one point, I was actually an introvert. Do you remember those days, Alvin?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was training. Alvin sent me to management training, leadership training, more soft skills training. And then I went a little cuckoo and bought it myself and bought more of it. But then I also come from healthcare, Ella, where it's required. But now let's get Alvin's perspective as well. But you highlight it by demonstrating these things. It's apparent in how you communicate with others.
Yeah. A couple of things I look for in an interview skill or interview is a couple of things. Number one, are they a good listener? And number two, can they articulate something without being long-winded? If I ask you what color is the sky, your answer should be blue. And that's it. I don't want to hear, well, on some days, depending on the day, it could be gray, depending, they want an answer. Just answer the question. We have something called LUA, listen to the question, understand the question, and answer the question. So I think that's one important thing. But Mike brings up a great one, which I like a lot, which is my favorite, is listening. One of my toughest interview questions, which I blew by the way. I was going for a vice president role at a different company. And I was going head to head. It was between me and another guy. And I knew the other guy was favored over me because I didn't work in that department, but I interviewed really well and I had other skills that was going to complement. He asked, the last interview I had was with the senior vice president, and he asked me, who did you meet with? And I said, I met with John, Mary, Mike, Tom, whatever. And then he went down and said, tell me what you learned from Mike. What did you learn from Tom? And it went each one. And that was a tough question, because you have to pay attention to every single interview and you have to remember every single interview. And so I remember that I didn't do very well on that question, unfortunately, which probably cost me the job, but lessons learned. Moving forward, I fixed that.
It's interesting. We did a lesson like that with our students a couple of weeks ago. The SEALs do what they call it a keep it in memory game, where we would literally have stuff in the room and say certain things to see if the students could perceive it. Because in an interview, what you perceive, you need to change. And a lot of people don't look and they don't listen. And when people ask me what's the biggest skill for an architect, I say communication and listening skills, because they're all worried about the tech, but it's not the tech. If you can't get the requirements, what do you have, Alvin?
Right.
They got nothing.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Let's see here. So I know we've got a time window with Alvin here, so I want to make sure we get to some good questions.
Yeah.
Are there any that stand out to you, Alvin, that you know that you immediately want to get to while I look through the list?
Let's see. Pavan has one at Alvin over LinkedIn. How to impress potential hiring manager. What would you expect people to write when they approach you for a job, let's say? Okay, so I assume I have to make some assumptions here on this question. I assume that somehow you saw a job on LinkedIn and you figured out who the hiring manager is, and you're directly sending them a message over LinkedIn because you want to apply for that job. That's what my assumption is going to be. Okay. So the first thing I would do is to see who you know in the company that could help you be a reference. That's the first thing I would do before sending any message.
Yeah.
That's super. That's how by the way, my job at Nimble Storage and my job at NVIDIA, that's the first thing I did. Oh, there's this job. Let me go see who I know at NVIDIA. Got 5 or 6 people I knew, sent them my resume, say, hey guys, I'm interested in this role. I need you to do internal reference. And that's how it worked. And then what I would do is I would just introduce myself, just say, like, hello, my name is Pavan. I work as a data scientist. I was intrigued by this message that I saw, and reading the description, it matches my skill set. I would love to do an informational interview with you, just so I could get a better understanding of the job. And the reason why you do an informational interview is because it's not a formal interview, but that gives you an opportunity to present yourself to the manager. And so if I get that, I always do informational. If someone says I want an informational, I'll say, sure. So then I call them, I explain what it's about. And then every once in a while, that person will sneak in, well, here's a little bit about me. Then I may say to myself, oh, wow, this guy's kind of interesting. I like their background. I say, you should have formally applied for the job, right? And then I'll remember them. So that's what my recommendation would be is send a very casual, say, you have a great background for this. You want to do informational interview and, kind of take it that way.
And I love that. Plus, Pavan, you're going to get something else that way. Normally, when you look at a job description, it's like a wish list that HR wrote that's got 50 people's jobs, 40 Olympic gold medals, and nothing related to the job. When you get to speak to that manager,
like this?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
You actually I didn't even know we asked the question, but when you actually speak to the hiring manager, you can find those 3 things in the job description that list 1,000 that they actually care about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
so he asked, why do they look so scary?
Yeah, so I could provide some context here, like, because I write a lot of job descriptions. I've probably written 30 in the last 2 years. When I write a job description, I'm writing a job description for the ultimate candidate, right? I want the jack of all trades because I know the potential of where my organization is going and what I need in the future. Now, the reality is I don't find everybody that I put in the description. So what I do is I do the best match I can, right? So I may have 15 things listed, and candidate 1 may have 10, candidate 2 may have 8. But just because candidate 1 has 10 doesn't mean I'm going to hire them, because as we talked about earlier, there could be a diamond in the rough that has better soft skills, that communicates better, has better vision, that's more driven, that has 8 skill sets. I'm going to go with that person, right? That's because they're going to grow to the 15 that I need. And so managers will do that. They'll make the job descriptions daunting because they're trying to find the best person possibly out there. So don't get discouraged. If you see a role like that, apply for it, right? As long as you have a few of the qualities that are there, you'll be fine.
I've never had more than 10% of the qualities on a job description, ever. But what I have were the skills that hiring managers desired: extreme competency in the 2 to 3 main things that they cared about. And it was all attitude, energy, enthusiasm, executive presence, communication skills, leadership. Which matters more to you, Alvin? Those technical wish list or all that other stuff?
Yeah, all the other stuff for sure. Definitely. And the other thing too, Mike, that you bring up, which is super important, all these soft skills. And there's a couple of questions around soft skills as well. You gotta practice, right? Like I remember when I was doing my interviews, I would practice with friends or my parents or sister or whoever it may be, your mentors. You got to practice those, like ask questions. Like it was funny. Somebody just asked me the other day to help them through, they're going for an interview, and they said, would you ask me questions and help me through an interview process? And I said, sure. And I remember I interviewed, and this person is very senior. She's, been in the industry for 20 years. But when she was answering my questions, she was taking like such a long time to get to the point. And I told her, I'm like, you need to net out your answer. And I said, let me explain how I would answer the question. And I said, A, B, C, D, done. Right? That's it. And so it's important that you practice. And for interviewing, I would look for a manager that actually interviews people that could give you direct feedback. And as I mentioned, get a board, get 3 or 4 managers, right? Like if someone wants to interview with me, for example, say, hey, Alvin, I want to interview with you. They interview with Mike, et cetera. Then you'll get a good understanding of how to prepare for an interview. That's important to understand.
And it's use multiple people. Sometimes I use Francis as an extreme interview coach for people because I want them getting somebody other than me. Sometimes Andrea, sometimes others, because you really need the perspective of different people. I'm obsessed with attitude and soft skills. And I'm obsessed with experts versus jack of all trades. That's what I heard. We all seem to be obsessed with the soft skills piece, but somebody else might be looking for something different. So get a feel for multiple people. You know how to position yourself.
So there's a question here that I know Mike normally likes to take the lead on, but they're also specifically asking about data analysis careers. Mm-hmm. So Sandra asks, how does someone with a professional medical background who is learning programming and data analysis sell ourselves with the competition of new graduates?
So Sandra, I'll give you the medical perspective. What kind of medical professional? I used to practice internal medicine.
She's okay. Yeah.
MRI technologist. Okay. So gotcha. So the real key is taking those skills from your last job and showing them that you need them, and also realizing that you need to have the right skills. So the first set of skills is you need to understand what those skills are for your career. And when it comes to data analysis, we've got Alvin and Chris know a lot about this. I'm not going to touch this. I'm going to leave that for them.
I'm going to hit that mute button if you bring that up again.
But you know something about data analysis, and I'm going to leave it alone there. And so the key is first learning the correct skills. Now, if you're going to school or getting a certification, you will not be learning the correct skills. So you're going to need to find out what those skills are and truly master those skills. So that's the first thing. The next thing is you need to take things from your background. So if you're an MRI technologist and you're doing MRIs, you're dealing with people that are afraid to go jump in an MRI machine. They get claustrophobic. So hopefully you've got some emotional intelligence to calm people down and bring out the best in others. Now in medicine, you're dealing with people in any kind of healthcare career, which gives you some good soft skills. So when you're on these interviews, show this. Now, when you're in any kind of healthcare career, it's all chaos. Now it's organized chaos, but it's chaos. The insurance doesn't pay for something. The prescription that one of us wrote is incorrect. There's all these people coming in. So you can manage chaos very well, and you can get to the bottom of things very well. It's just something for you to sell to the hiring manager on the interview. But realize there's a lot of things from your past life that are valued, and you need to show that. Now, the next thing is really showing off those communication skills and really showing off a good attitude, energy, enthusiasm, and passion. Showing off a willingness to learn. Showing that you lack experience, but you have competency. You do that by figuring out the top 2 or 3 things in your career. I'll let the other people that know them better. And truly mastering those 2 things, 3 things. And don't worry about all the nice to haves. Worry about those small critical things that you're there. And then I'll let Alvin, who knows much more about data and data analysis and data scientist and big data than me, talk about the rest of it and his insight as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Mike said makes logical sense. And then I think, obviously you have to take classes and get the background in programming and data analysis, etc. And then, the other thing too is what I've seen is sometimes people need their break. And in your case, Sandra, like when I was a civil engineer, I had to make a break. There was like a market transitioning that was happening. In your case, a startup may be a good place to start because they're willing to take risks and take on people, with a good attitude and everything, with a little bit less experience than somebody with a CS degree, etc. So startups are a very good, viable option to gain experience. And then once you gain your experience, then you move on and progress after that.
All right. So I'm going to try and squeeze in a couple more for you before you leave us. Where did it go? There was a question. Okay, here it is. Devin asked, when do you know you're ready to start interviewing?
This is a pretty easy question.
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to hear.
Well, Alvin, I'll let you answer.
I want to hear what Alvin has to say about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like that's a personal choice, right? It's whenever you feel ready. I mean, I personally think once you've learned some of the classes or you have the subject matter expertise in what you're applying for, and you have practice a couple of rounds of interviews and got some mentors, and go for it. Don't let anything hold you back. You should just go for it, because the more you start applying and interviewing, that's all going to be training for you too as well. You may not get your first role, but the second one that comes along, you're going to be better prepared for it. So I always say, go for it. Just throw your hat in the ring, and you have nothing to lose.
And I say, wait till you know you can do the job.
Yeah.
When you can do the job, then interview. Because if you can't, if you can't do the job, whatever that job is, if an architect, it's design, present, and sell. If it's an engineer, it's engineering skills. All that's going to happen is you're going to go on an interview. They'll interview you. They won't hire you, and then you're not going to go interview with that same company again because they're not going to want to interview you.
Right.
So like Alvin said, first, make sure you can do it. And then after you can do it, there should be nothing hold you back. But if you can't do the job, don't even waste your time. Right. It's just going to burn bridges.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's see here. Well, instead of trying to squeeze in another question, let's see if Alvin wants to share any last words.
Yeah, sounds good.
Comments with us before he leaves us.
Yeah, I think the key is, guys, here is in today's world, there are a slew of resources that are out there to help you. You have the great company with Go Cloud Careers is going to help. You have people in the industry that could be mentors for you. There's a lot of tools online. There's books. There's a lot of opportunity. The key is to understand a few things. Number one, it's important to network with people through LinkedIn, make connections. Number two, absorb all the advice that you're hearing from Go Cloud Careers with all the various speakers. These fireside chats are valuable because you're hearing directly from people that have been in the industry for a long time, that have worked in management or that are hiring. Take the advice to heart. Number three, be a goal-getter, be driven. All of you are going to be successful as long as you have the will and drive to be successful. And number 4, always educate yourself, whether you're reading books. Continuous education is always something that we grow upon. And so those are probably the biggest, I think, key takeaways as I look back on my career that helped enable me to be successful. So that's what I'd recommend for all of you. And I want to wish you the best of luck in your journeys. And I'm sure I'll probably do another one of these with Mike at some point in my career here.
I sure hope you will, Alvin. I mean, I think you added so much to this how to get a tech job, what hiring managers look for in an employee tech career coaching discussion. I've known Alvin now for 20 years.
Yeah.
He's an exceptional manager. He's done so much for me. He kind of brought me into the coaching world many, many years ago, and I've loved it. We collaborate. He's got the most wonderful family. And I'm just really grateful that you're here, Alvin, sharing your expertise with our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
Yeah, Alvin, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, Alvin is so great that he, when I got handicapped for a while and really sort of fell off a cliff just doing nothing other than PT all day, when we spoke to each other, years had passed. It was literally like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Like no time passed.
Yeah. It was really great.
It really was. I got to see you in Florida and your new wife, and I'm so excited to see her.
Yeah.
So fantastic, Alvin. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks
All
for
right.
sharing your wisdom and expertise.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Appreciate everything. And best of luck to all the students. And if you guys ever need anything, just look me up on LinkedIn, connect to me, start your networking now. You never know. I have jobs. So and you have to work in alliance with you never know. So
exactly. You never know.
Yeah. All right, guys. Take care. All the best to you. Wishing you a very happy holiday season coming up, and all the best to everyone.
See you all later.
Thank you, Alvin. Have a good night.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.
That was another awesome win, another interview. This really, and I just want to remind all the students, all the parallels that we teach day, every day, and how Alvin continues to echo what they have grown up and learned over their career and what Mike teaches every day. So I hope everyone really enjoyed that. I really hope that they see the benefits, the resources, the community. Everything is of such a high caliber and value that we offer at Go Cloud Careers, and to invite people who want to learn about the cloud and to share in what we have to offer here. So what do you guys think?
I think it's been so much fun. I'm going to protect my voice, not talk too much longer. So if you haven't liked or subscribed to our channel or hit the bell, please do so, because we've got a whole lot of exciting things coming for you. If you've not downloaded our completely free AWS certified.
Hey. You got 2 other people here that can say all this stuff.
Okay, even better. So I'm going to let my team speak. We're going to rest my overly used voice. I'm honored and privileged to have all of you here tonight. Hope you had a really good time on this how to get a tech job, what hiring managers look for an employee, tech career coaching special episode of the Head in the Clouds podcast. And if you can give me a hashtag, Alvin Da Costa, and a hashtag cloud hired.
Let's do a hashtag NVIDIA. Scratch. What do you think of that?
Works for me too.
All right. Let's do all 3 of them. Give us
all
hashtag.
3. Yeah, that's 3 hashtags literally make the algorithm happy. A hashtag Alvin Da Costa, a hashtag cloud hired, and a hashtag NVIDIA.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So since I'm trying to get Mike to stop talking, I'm actually going to
Yes.
mute. All right. I just muted you. You're done. All
Yeah,
right.
you're
so,
done. Turmeric, whatever. You got to do that, Mike. We'll take it over.
I really enjoyed the show. Like all of our guests. Like I love all of our shows, but this one in particular, you talked about the parallels that from his talking points, from his mouth, that paralleled with what we say, what I say, what Mike says, what Dr. Johnson and Dr. Long say, what the people that are talking to Mike and I when they're trying to fill positions or trying to develop curriculum for their companies. They're saying all these same things, and you go from us, the educators, I guess you would call us, to the people like Alvin that are employing the people that we're educating.
Mhm.
And you hear the same things. It was an exciting conversation.
Yeah. There's a lot of
started
takeaways.
I started off excited because I got to hear everybody saying cloud hired every time. I'm glad that I added that to the end of the intro, because it's like it's a great. I'm sure if I go back and start the video again, like my face is like a
That's
mile
what
wide.
isn't that what drives us? What gets us up? Definitely gets us up in the morning to try to formulate ways to continue that hot streak of cloud hires and increase it even more so.
Yeah. All right. So Mike started to talk about a couple of things. So so as we have mentioned and announced on LinkedIn today, we do have our updated AWS exam guide for both our associate and professional exams. So make sure that you get your copy. You will find the link here in the chat box, and you'll also find the link in the descriptions. And as Alonzo said during the pre-show recording that we have, make sure to register for our How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar on Thursday. And we're going to tell you everything that you need to know and exactly how you can get your first cloud job without experience. Regardless of what people tell you on LinkedIn or on YouTube that isn't on this channel, or anywhere else, you don't have to have 50 gajillion years of experience and 18 certifications to get your first cloud job. So make sure to register for that webinar and join us on Thursday this week.
And also anybody, sorry, Chris, if anybody who wanted to get a list of the books that we discussed, I got maybe 99% of them. I may have missed one, but we did add it in the announcements channel for you to further hone your capabilities when it's time for you to start getting cloud hired.
Yep. And then one last thing I want to remind everybody about, since Microsoft decided that they wanted to remind us how important security was over the weekend, we decided to extend our security discount code. And for those of y'all that don't know, there was apparently some misconfigurations and some security lapses that exposed data for 65,000 organizations on Azure. So security is key. Hence why we have our discount code security for all of our programs. No shade. Be competent in what you're doing. So that's all I've got to add. Mike, since I muted you, I'm going to unmute you in case you do want to say some last
Wait a
words.
minute. I got to put the timer on because
I was going to tell you got to put the timer up.
I'm putting it on. So yeah, Mike, you're on the clock.
Actually, I was just going to thank everybody for being here. Love connecting with the community. Love sharing my 25 years experience. And I had a lot of hair. One day I'll bring in a photo when I started in tech. And it's just so nice to be with you all here. So have a wonderful night.
That's too long of a timer. Is that 3 minutes?
And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Expect more live streams, more exciting things, more things to help you in your career. So many things are coming. So subscribe, hit the bell, and follow us on LinkedIn. I'll talk to you later. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day, morning or afternoon or evening.